Okay, as long as it's good. Is the Bible historically reliable? All right, class closed. It gets very confusing. Like this section, kings with the same name in two different areas at the same time, but a few years off. It gets hard to trace the timeline. And that's where everybody says, well, the timeline doesn't match. It does. Just do your homework. A lot of it's because it's not like the United States where George Bush was president from this year to this year, and then the next one from this year to this year. Over there, you could have the king ruling and his son ruling at the same time for 5 years before the father retires and the son takes over. So there's 5 years where they both rule. So the timeline overlaps, and everybody says the timeline's wrong. No, they're both ruling at that time. So it gets even. Well, she married the king and controlled him. Controlled him.
My lesson last week said they recently found a stamp, like with her initials or what would have been her
Yeah.
biblical name, that she was able to
Yep.
actually have power.
Yep.
She used her husband's stamp to have all these people killed.
Yeah. But she had her own because he gave her that much authority. But for the higher up stuff, she would just take his and use it, so it really didn't matter. Anybody know the memory verse besides mine? Anybody want to read the memory verse? Go ahead, Jason.
Philippians 3, verses 13 and 14. But one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward for what lies ahead, I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus.
Very good. All right, so last week we were dealing with Elijah. Elijah was a prophet and referred to many times throughout Scripture. He was a type of John the Baptist. You'll find that in Matthew 11. And he appeared at the transfiguration of Jesus. He's often linked to Moses because both spent 40 days fasting in the wilderness before they encountered God. They both parted waters and crossed on dry land. Both Elijah and Moses appeared at the transfiguration. Both are known as great prophets and referred to repeatedly in the New Testament. And they both had proteges who served them before succeeding them in carrying on their ministry. Moses trains Joshua to take his place, and Elijah trains Elisha to replace him. Joshua was confirmed as Moses' replacement by parting the Jordan. Elisha likewise parts the Jordan, mirroring his predecessor, paralleling Joshua. So it's rather interesting.
Could he have said no to being a prophet?
He could try, kind of like Jonah said no to witnessing to Nineveh. You could try. It doesn't work. He'd have been the prophet one way or another. So the last couple of weeks we looked at Elijah and his role as a prophet. One of the major efforts was to confront the false prophets that promoted the worship of Baal. How did God demonstrate his power over Baal? Yeah, set everything on fire, consumed the whole altar, water, dust. What relationship did we see between idolatry and God's jealousy? Because God is a creator, he has a right, and he alone has the right to be worshipped. So whenever we give our affections to something other than him, we see his jealousy. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just thinking, there's spiritual idolatry and there's physical.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a big difference, but I don't know, just in case.
Yeah, there's a big difference, but they, in one sense, they're still the same. Whether we worship power, money, influence, We still put it before God, which makes it an idol. We don't worship stone and wood as much as they used to, but we still worship idols.
Do they still worship idols over there?
Yeah, some places still do. Yeah. You know, Buddha, that little statue in China, does a whole bunch of them.
I don't understand how they can supposedly be smart people worship something that it's not answering them back. You go to God, he answers you one way or another.
Yeah. Sometimes the answer is no, but he answers. But, you know, they think the same thing. We talk to this invisible being in the sky, they at least have a block of wood. But, so, it's all they were taught, it's all they know. To them, it's perfectly normal. Yes, Catholicism, I think, is very big in worshiping idols. I mean, you can't walk into one without a Mary, and they all pray to that Mary, and they all have a guy hanging on a cross still that they pray to. Yeah, yeah, they carried a lot of it in.
Well, we were at a Catholic wedding, and the priest didn't allow us to take communion because we weren't Catholic. But after the wedding, the bride and groom went over to the statue of the Queen, prayed and prayed and prayed that they'd be able to have children. Either you can have children or you can't. Not up to that either.
No.
Probably Mother Mary.
Yeah, I don't know which one's their saint, because I don't know if it's Mary or it's one of the saints. Saint of childbirth, or who knows.
My mom had to have that. When my mom got married at her mom's church, when they went back to my dad's church, they told him that they weren't married because he wasn't there present at the wedding. So in the eyes of Catholics, they weren't married. So they didn't get married again when I was born. I was so confused on that whole entire thing because he had pictures before and after, and he had to explain it to me.
One of the things that turned me off when I was young, 19 or so, a friend of mine, his name was Chris, his girlfriend got pregnant. And they wanted to get married before the child was born. Well, he was Catholic. And he went there and they said, we can't marry you because you had a child out of wedlock, but if you donate $2,000, we can do a wedding. I said, they said, what? It was paying some tribute to something, and then, but, so they got married in a Protestant church, but I'm like, you could tell something's wrong. And that was even before I was saved. Yeah, they want to do the right thing, but you can't unless you donate money. Well, money doesn't change whether it's right or wrong to do it, so what does money have to do with it? Anywho, back to Elijah. We looked at God's judgment on Ahab and Jezebel. What was their punishments? Death and eaten up by dogs. So much so that I think there was only a hand left of Jezebel at the end. They did, all but one hand. I can't remember. Because you read the one account and there's nothing left but her one hand.
Especially when it's probably people she trusted, and they're the ones that pushed her out of it.
Not quite. We'll get to that, I think, today. Who pushes? Well, we'll get to that right now, I think it is. After Elijah fled from Jezebel, what three things did God tell him he had to do? He had to do three things. He had to anoint Hazael, king of Syria, anoint Jehu, king of Israel, and anoint Elijah as his prophet after him. So who pushed Jezebel out the window? Jehu did. The one that he anointed as king is the one who shoves her out the window. Hazael was the king of Syria during the time of it, and Elijah becomes his successor. All right, so now we're going to jump out of this because we're going to go to Logos. All right, 1 Kings 19 is where we meet Elisha. After the showdown with the prophets of Baal, Elijah fled from Jezebel and retreated to Mount Sinai, Mount Horeb, it's called here. In despair, believing he was the only one, God told him there were 7,000 left, and he always keeps a remnant. As Elijah headed towards Damascus, the Lord told him to stop and call Elijah along the way. So that is 1 Kings 19, starting in verse 19 through 21. So he departed from there and found Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen in front of him, and he was with the 12th. Elijah passed by him and cast his cloak upon him. And he left the oxen and ran after Elijah and said, "Let me kiss my father and mother, and then I will follow you." And he said to him, Go back again for what I have done for you. And he returned from following him and took the yoke of oxen and sacrificed them and boiled their flesh with the yokes of the oxen and gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he arose and went after Elijah and assisted him. So how does Elijah signal his successor, Elisha?
How did you know that?
Yeah, God told him, go.
Was it common knowledge that they would, if they put the cloak over you?
I think it starts here. We use it, passing on the mantle. Have you heard that? So if you read this in the King James Version, it's not cloak, it's mantle, which was an old word for cloak. So that's where the whole passing of the mantle comes from. It all leads back to here. How does Elisha respond? He leaves immediately, but then asks if he can go back and say goodbye. And what does he do when he goes back?
That's a big job. He killed all those oxen.
One pair, two of them. There was 12. He was in the last set. And 2 oxen would have been.
Tell us this too, it says he took the yoke of oxen.
Yeah, but if you read up here, he was with the 12th. There was 12 yokes of oxen, so 12 pairs of oxen. He was running the 12th pair, and that's the pair that he sacrifices along with their yoke.
Didn't have all 12 himself.
No. No, he.
How he could control.
Yeah, he's just got the one pair. So he sacrifices them along with the yoke, feeds it to the people, but what does that signify? He's leaving and not coming back. He got rid of his own instrument of work. Sacrificed it, fed the people, and he will not be returning. Because if he's going to return, he's going to keep them to work when he gets back. He will now be a servant of Elijah. Now we're going to jump ahead about 20 years. Flip with me to 2 Kings verses 1 through 18. So all this time Elijah's been traveling with Elijah and being discipled by this great man of God. Finally the time comes for Elisha to take over, and that's where we read about here. Now when the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven in a whirlwind, I messed it up already. Here we go. In a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha were on their way from Gilgal. And Elijah said to Elisha, "Please stay here, for the Lord has sent me as far as Bethel." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So they went down to Bethel. And the sons of the prophet who were in Bethel came out to Elisha and said to him, "Do you know that today the Lord will take away your master from over you? And he said, Yes, I know it. Keep quiet. Elijah said to him, Elisha, please stay here, for the Lord has sent me to Jericho. And he said, As the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you. So they came to Jericho. The sons of the prophets who were at Jericho drew near to Elisha and said to him, Do you know that today the Lord will take away your master from over you? And he answered, Yes, I know it. Keep quiet. Then Elijah said to him, Please stay here, for the Lord has sent me to the Jordan. But he said, As the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you. So the two of them went on. 50 men of the sons of the prophets also went and stood at some distance from them, as they both were standing by the Jordan. And Elijah took his cloak and rolled it up and struck the water, and the water parted to the one side and to the other, till the two of them could go over on dry ground. When they crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, Ask what I shall do for you before I am taken from you. And Elisha said, Please, let there be a double portion of your spirit on me. And he said, You have asked a hard thing. If you see me as I am being taken from you, it shall be so for you. But if you do not see me, it shall not be so. And as they still went on and talked, behold, chariots of fire and horses of fire separated the two of them. And Elisha went up in the whirlwind to heaven. And Elijah saw it, and he cried, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen, and they saw him no more. Then he took hold of his own clothes and tore them in two pieces. And he took up the cloak of Elijah that had fallen from him, and went back and stood on the bank of the Jordan. Then he took the cloak of Elijah that had fallen from him and struck the water, saying, Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah? And when he had struck the water parted to the one side and to the other, and Elisha went over. Now when the sons of the prophets who were at Jericho saw him, opposite him, they said, The spirit of Elijah rests on Elisha. And they came to meet him and bowed to the ground before him. And they said to him, Behold, now there are with your servants 50 strong men. Please let them go and seek your master. It may be that the Spirit of the Lord has caught him up and cast him upon some mountain or in some valley. And he said, You shall not send. But they argued him till he was ashamed, and he said, Send. They sent therefore 50 men, and for 3 days they sought him, but did not find him. And they came back to him while they were staying at Jericho, and said to him, Did I not say, Do not go? So verse 1, what literary device is being used? Now, when the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven in a whirlwind, foreshadowing. Verse 1 tells you everything that's going to happen before it happens. It tells you what all this leads up to. Did Elijah know what was going to happen? Yeah, I think he did too. He seems to be leading forward that he's going there to be taken. He wants Elisha to stay behind so he doesn't see it. Does Elisha know what's going to be happening?
I don't think so.
He seemed to know it was going to be taken because every time he was confronted with that he was going to be gone, he said, I know, but shut up.
Yeah.
He wasn't happy about it, but he seemed to know vaguely about what was going to happen.
But he didn't realize that Elijah would be taken up in the world.
No, I don't think he realized the whirlwind part. What miracle does Elijah perform? Parts the water. And they walk across on dry ground. Elijah offers Elisha a request before he's taken away, but what does Elisha ask for? A double portion of his spirit. So knowing that Elijah was a prophet for God, he's asking that God work through him twice as much power as he did Elijah. What character does that reveal of Elisha? Yeah, what character trait?
Said it was like Solomon asking for wisdom.
Yep.
He
So-
didn't ask for something for himself.
Yeah, selfless service. His character traits are for other people, not for himself, because he didn't ask for wealth, fame, fortune. He asked for something that would serve the people of Israel. How did Elisha respond to Elijah's departure? He lamented. Yep, tore his clothes in two.
And he found the water just to prove to himself that he could do it.
Probably had part of it, and then proved to the people that he was who he's called to be. But I'm sure he has proven to himself some too. Yep. Because he starts out with saying, "Where is the God?" And he, are you with me?
I'm surprised he would even question it. He had seen so much in their travels.
Yeah, but he'd seen Elijah do so much. Now he's going to be the one that has to do it. So that confirmation that God is with him would strengthen everything he's about to do. Like I said, this is where passing on the mantle or taking up the mantle comes from, because King James Version translates it as mantle instead of cloak,
Why did he tell them to be quiet?
because he didn't want to hear it.
Oh, he didn't let
Yeah, he didn't want to hear it. Like when you know something bad is and everybody keeps reminding you and you just tell them, I don't want to hear it. That was him. I don't want to hear it. I know they're taking 20 years. 20 years he spent with this guy as a father figure. Him dying and leaving is not going to be a good thing for him. He's going to grieve. It's like when your father or your mother passes, you grieve. Regardless if you know they're going to heaven, you're still going to grieve. That's what he's saying. Oh, why? Yeah. Elisha was the one. They are, and when you start saying them together, they sound the same. When Elisha returned without Elijah, how did the sons of the prophets know that Elijah was now the principal prophet? How'd he cross the Jordan again? Now he parted it. So now the 50 that are looking on all know that he is God's prophet, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Now this isn't the first miracle that Elijah does. He served 20 years with Elijah. He did many in there. That's in chapters 2 and 3 that we skipped over. Or no, I guess we're not there yet. But this is the first of the miracles. We're going to skip over 2 and 3, which has a whole bunch of them. And we're going to go to 2 Kings 4. Second Kings 4, 1 through 7. Now the wife of one of the sons of the prophets cried to Elisha, "Your servant, my husband, is dead. And you know that your servant feared the Lord, but the creditor has come to take my 2 children to be his slaves." And Elijah said to her, "What shall I do for you? Tell me, what have you in your house?" And she said, "Your servant has nothing in the house except a jar of oil." Then he said, "Go outside, borrow vessels from all your neighbors, empty vessels, and not a few. Then go in and shut the door behind yourself and your sons and pour into all these vessels. When one vessel is full, set it aside." So she went from him and shut the door behind herself and her sons, and as she poured, they brought the vessels to her. When the vessels were full, she said to her son, "Bring me another vessel." And he said to her, "There is not another." Then the oil stopped flowing. She came and told the man of God, and he said, "Go, sell the oil and pay your debts, and you and your sons shall live on the rest." So what is the widow's concern? Her sons were going to be taken into slavery for the debt, which was common back then. If you couldn't pay your debt, your kids would be taken and they would serve to pay your debt. Rank up debt, have a whole bunch of kids, and just send them out. What did Elisha tell the widow to do? Go gather up empty jars. And then that little oil turned into much. It ran until she was out of vessels.
Well, it doesn't really say she went out to get vessels. It said she filled one and ran out. So.
Filled many, because it says when one was full, set it aside, and the sons would bring another. But it does skip over her gathering them. But it implies that she gathered a lot of them. Because he says, go sell it, it'll pay your debt, and what? Then you and your kids can live on it. No. She had a flask full of oil like they would have, just a small jar. And when it talks about Jesus bring me the jars to turn to wine, those were like 55-gallon drums. So who knows the size of the drum she brought in, but it was a lot. So out of this little flask, she just kept filling these big jars. Yeah, it was a more expensive commodity, like it still is today. You paid like $12 for this little jar of oil. And this would have been really good oil. She'd got top dollar for it. It was miraculous oil. So this miracle is similar to the one that Elijah performed, though there is some differences. Remember Elijah, she had a little bit of oil and a little bit of flour, and she fed Elijah for quite a while. Elijah, her, and her son, on just enough left to make 2 small cakes. Well, Elijah does close to the same thing. Like, this isn't his first miracle. He'd already healed contaminated water by throwing in a bowl of salt. He called out bears to maul a young mob, an unruly mob of young men. He filled a dry stream bed with water, even though there was no rain. That's all in chapters 2 and 3, if you read them. So let's carry on. 8 through 37. It's a long reading. One day Elijah went on to Shunem, where a wealthy woman lived, who urged him to eat some food. So whenever he passed that way, he would turn in there and eat food. And she said to her husband, "Behold, now I know that this is the holy man of God, who is continually passing our way. Let us make a small room on the roof with walls, and put there a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp, so that whenever he comes to us, he can go in there." One day he came there, and he turned into the chamber and rested. And he said to Gehazi, his servant, "Call the Shunammite." When he called her, she stood before him, and he said to her, "Say now to her, see, you have taken all this trouble for us. What is it to be done for you? Would you have a word spoken on your behalf to the king or to the commander of the army?" She answered, "I dwell among my own people." And he said, "What then is to be done for her?" Gehazi answered, "Well, she has no son, and her husband is old." He said, "Call her." And when he had called her, she stood in the doorway, and he said, "At this season, about this time next year, you shall embrace a son." And she said, "No, my lord, O man of God, do not lie to your servant." But the woman conceived, and she bore a son about that time the following spring, as Elijah had said to her. When the child had grown, he went out that day to his father's among the reapers. And he said to his father, "Oh, my head hurts, my head." The father said to his servant, "Carry him to his mother." And when he had lifted him and brought him to his mother, the child sat on her lap till noon, and then he died. And she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, and shut the door behind him, and went out. Then she called to her husband and said, "Send me one of your servants and one donkey, that I may quickly go to the man of God and come back again." And he said, "Why will you go to him today? It is neither new moon nor Sabbath." She said, "All is well." Then she saddled the donkey and said to her servant, "Urge the animal on. Do not slacken the pace for me unless I tell you." So she set out and came to the man of God at Mount Carmel. When the man of God saw her coming, he said to Gehazi, his servant, "Look, there's a Shunammite. Run at once to meet her and say to her, 'Is all well with you? Is all well with your husband? Is all well with your child?'" And she answered him, "All is well." And when she came to the mountain to the man of God, she caught hold of his feet. And Gehazi came to push her away, but the man of God said, "Leave her alone, for she is in bitter distress. And the Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me." Then she said, "Did I ask my Lord for a son? Did I not say, 'Do not deceive me'?" He said to Gehazi, "Tie up your garments and take my staff in your hand and go. If you meet anyone, do not greet him. If anyone greets you, do not reply. And lay my staff on the face of the child." Then the mother of the child said, "As the Lord lives, and as you live yourself, I will not leave you." So he arose and followed her. Gehazi went on ahead and laid the staff on the face of the child, but there was no sound or sign of life. Therefore he returned to meet him and told him, "The child has not awakened." When Elijah came into the house, he saw the child lying dead on his bed. So he went in, shut the door behind the two of them, and prayed to the Lord. And he went up and lay on the child, putting his mouth on his mouth, his eyes on his eyes, and his hands on his hands. And he stretched himself upon him. The flesh of the child became warm. Then he got up again and walked once back and forth in the house, and went up and stretched himself upon him. The child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. Then he summoned Gehazi and said, "Call the Shunammite." So he called her, and when she came to him, he said, "Pick up your son." She came and fell at his feet, bowing to the ground. Then she picked up her son and went on. So what do we know about the Shunammite woman? We knew she was rich, but that's about it. We're never given her name, any real details about her, just that they had money. We can infer that she feared God because she wanted to respect the prophet of God, so much so that she's going to build him a room. She would feed them anytime they passed and give them a place to sleep. What does she ask for in return? Nothing. She says, "I don't want nothing. I don't need nothing." She just wanted to do that for them. What was the woman's response to Elijah, suggesting that he would like to repay her kindness? She said, "I'm content. I'm good. You don't owe me nothing." But what does Elisha determine to do for her? Give her a son. What happens to that son? Dies. Sounds like maybe heat stroke or aneurysm. I don't know which one. It doesn't say. Young, I would think. Yeah, he sat in her lap, and this is his first time in the field. He's fairly young. What is her response?
Doesn't even sound like she tells her husband that he died.
Yeah, doesn't tell her husband. Everything's well. I just need a donkey. I'm going to go get Elisha. Her first response was to go to the man of God.
This question, why today? Weird question. Why are you home today?
Yeah, why are you going today? It's not the new moon. It's not a Sabbath. Why are you going to see the man of God today? It's like, I know something's wrong. You're not telling me the whole truth.
Like they don't do anything except on Sunday.
Yeah. I wish we'd have got to the contradicting chronology, but you guys can do that one this week if you want. Takes those mixed verses of all that stuff and figures out the timeline. But any questions besides why he had to lay on the boy and why he sneezed 7 times? Because I don't have an answer for either one of those. But that's what I ask when I read it. Why that weird ritual thing? It doesn't, but I don't know. The sneezing really throws me off. All right, let's close in prayer.